Hello, my name is Hamlet Dobbins, and this is Memphis Material, an oral history project chronicling the stories of the visual arts in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis Material is a podcast that celebrates the personal histories, the intimate stories, and the studio practices of some of the people who help shape the creative landscape of our city. These unedited interviews are all recorded at the Memphis Listening Lab, an archival gem located in the majestic Crosstown Concourse in beautiful Midtown Memphis. The website for Memphis Material was designed by the wonderful Brian Dixon. Today's episode is the third of 3 interviews that I recorded with the amazing Brittney Boyd Bullock. This interview was recorded on March 5th, 2025. Now, we don't have sponsors per se, but if we did have a sponsor, today's episode would be brought to you by the wonderful people at CAM. CAM has been such a huge game changer for the landscape of art education in Memphis, and I'm sure soon will be a huge game changer for the rest of the creative community. Also, my oldest stepdaughter has been through the CAM summer program, and I know that it is a stunning addition to her life. And so a huge thank you to the people at CAM. Again, today's interview is part 3 of 3 interviews that I did with Brittney Boyd Bullock. This one was recorded on March 5th, 2025. Enjoy the episode. All right, Comedy Gold, Hamlet and Brittney. Okay, so one more time. Today is Wednesday, March 5th, 2025. We are here for the 3rd installment of Brittney Boyd Bullock. Okay, Brittney, first interview, you mentioned the portraits. Talk to me about those portraits. Who were they? I can't remember who they were. What were the subjects of those portraits?
Mm-hmm. So I have a collection of ebony magazines. I think I talked about that maybe in a previous conversation. And so the images were from the collection that I had, mostly women. And as I would thumb through the ebony magazines, I would, choose an image that I thought was compelling and something that I would want to imitate, make larger, that kind of thing. And so that's where the inspiration of the imagery came from.
Okay, now do I remember those images? I remember you were talking about the ebony magazine, and I remember also that you were talking about in the collages you were thinking about mostly black men. Mm-hmm. But I remember in the portrait some of them were women. Is that right? Or am I totally misremembering?
No, that's right.
Okay.
So even if I think about like the trajectory of like the image use, right? So early on, I was doing the sewing machine and portraits. Those were women. And then when I moved to like collage, the analog collage making, those became men.
Right. Okay. All right. Great. Okay. Yeah, that's perfect. That's good. And that was a little bit of a blank spot because I was listening to it the other day and I was like, I don't remember the subject of those portraits. I remember them being really beautiful, and I remember them being mostly like sort of contour drawings, but done with the sewing machine.
Yeah.
And on sort of a stark background.
Yep.
And I remember how really striking they were. All right. So last time we ended it after you were talking about about Hendrix being born, and then also the CSA, that project. And so if I remember right, we were around 2017, 2018, somewhere in there. And so let's get all of the more recent stuff. Talk to us.
Okay.
What else was going on in your life at that time?
2018, Hendrix was born, and he's a summer baby, so he's born in July. And at that time, I, was not actually into my studio practice as much. And I was making things at home, right? Because new mom. And then the CSA opportunity came about. Another opportunity for me to exhibit some new work came about. And so that was like, I would say, my first public showing of the collage work. And then from there, the practice grew, right? So I became more interested in the images that I was choosing, more interested in the material choice and like why these materials, what do I want to use? But the journey started there for me for collage.
Okay. Now, thinking about that in terms of the collage, what else was going on in your life at that time? Because, I mean, at this point, the kiddo had been born, he's here in the world, and then you're juggling that and the studio practice and everything else in the world. And so what else was going on with you professionally in terms of thinking about your working life?
Yeah, I had a full-time job as well, working at the Memphis Music Initiative here in the city. And so as a director, I had a very small team, small but mighty, right? And we were doing the work. So once, I was back at work, I was responsible for working with high schoolers and offering them a job for the summer. So ultimately, the work was around creative youth development and those who were interested in being an artist, whether it was a musician or visual artist or what have you. We would invite them into the program. They would work for the summer in other arts organizations in the city, but then also work on their own practice and their own craft. And they would be paid to do so. So much like I had created a program in the community with Klondike, Smoky City, and Miss Quincy, I was doing very similar work in a nonprofit organization. And so those things were kind of, in a way, not running congruently, but they were talking to each other, if you will.
Now, how did you end up with the Memphis Music Initiative?
They poached me. They poached me. So when I was at Crosstown, MMI was in its very like a conceptual stage, right? Ideation stage. And a former colleague had reached out and was like, hey, I want to know more about Crosstown, what you all are doing, mission, all that. And so we met and had coffee. We talked about that. I did my Crosstown spiel, like, okay, this is what we do. This is how we do it. This is where we're going. And he was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then he shared a little bit about, what MMI and the conceptual phase of it. And then he said, but like, what do you really do? And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, like, who are you? Like, what do you? And so I started to talk about me as an artist and this program that I had just launched in partnership with a neighborhood. And I was really excited about it. And so we went into that and he was like, yeah, will you come work for us? And I was like, well, no, like, I'm okay. Like, I like what I'm doing. Things are fine. And he was persistent. And we walked away from that conversation. I thought we walked away from that conversation of like, oh, okay, he has what he needs, but clearly he was coming to get me. So he would reach out and then he asked again and I was like, no. And he was like, well, what do you think about helping us design our program and, being a consultant for us and helping us build it and then launch it. And then you can like, dissolve whatever partnership this is. And I was like, okay, well, I could do that. I can build a program. That's easy for me. And we did that. So I
like how you were just like, oh, that's easy for me.
Yeah. Because it's not, I'm a project manager by heart. Like, I'm very process driven. My art is process driven, right? I'm very sequential, very linear. And I say it's easy, but not always, right? And I've had some really great mentors in my life to help steward me along the way. But when I say it's easy, I'm thinking like the way in which my brain thinks. It feels like I can do this in a way that feels linear, right? Like, so that's what I mean when I say easy. But yeah, I took on, this contract and I built the program along with one other consultant, Cheryl, who's a friend of mine now, dear friend. And we built the program and And when it was time for me to leave, they asked again, and I was like, I'll stay. And that's how I got to.
So now, how long were you there at the Memphis Music Initiative?
Full duration, 7.5 years.
Wow, that's a huge amount of time.
Yeah.
Especially thinking about how many things you've done over the years and how many times you've changed. And so like thinking about that, what were some of the things that you were able to do there that felt better or fulfilled more of your desire to be engaged with the community than, say, maybe some of the things that you had done in the past?
Yeah. Well, at MMI, there were, it was very explicit of who we were there to engage with, who we were there to align with, and who we were there to benefit for, right? So it was very explicit that we were there for Black and brown young people. And that off top was like, I'm in, right? And for various reasons. So that was one. I think two, MMI at the time was an organization that was, it still is. It's Black led, but there are so many cool Black folks in the organization. In one organization, I had never seen that before in my life. And that was like I was so curious and interested about the people there and their experiences, not only professionally, but also like life experiences, that invigorated my experience in time. I learned so much. That organization grounded me in a way to where I feel like I could pretty much do anything based on all the things that I picked up while working there. At the time when I first came on board, my direct supervisor was Darren Isom, and he, brilliant man, was a great coach and mentor for me. And so it just felt like a really great point in my life where I could look at my professional career and really grow it and could see the fruit of that labor. So
now, in my brain, sometimes, like I was saying, I hear the voice of other people listening to it. And so I'm curious. There's a part of me that's like, duh, Hamlet, of course, Brittney got excited about being in a space with lots of really motivated Black people. So, but just out of curiosity, how would you describe that feeling, that satisfaction, that pleasure to maybe someone who does not necessarily understand the importance of such a experience?
Yeah. So, in the nonprofit world,
you're doing so good.
Thanks.
I see you over there. You're like, okay, here we go.
Here we go.
let me explain it to you, Hamlet. Okay, go ahead.
In the nonprofit world, it is an anomaly to experience a space where leadership is Black led, let alone any of the other leadership positions or different roles in the organization being filled by Black people. It is, at least in Memphis, right, where I am. I don't think that that's true in all places, but in this sector, and at that time, you didn't find a lot of Black folks in leadership positions and in nonprofit spaces. And so when I got to MMI, seeing folks who looked like me, who could culturally relate, who could advocate on behalf of Black and brown young people in the ways in which I wanted to advocate, meant a lot. It wasn't a lot of questioning. It wasn't a lot of pushback, because we all, although we were, born in different places, because we were Black, we all culturally had an understanding around why this work was important. So we had a level of buy-in that was undeniable. And whereas in some of the, organizations that I worked in before, that wasn't the case, right? Oftentimes I was the only Black person, or one of three, or one of two, right? And I had to advocate on behalf of, resources or opportunities in ways that didn't always resonate with other people. And I didn't have to do that here. It was understood. Like, this is what we're doing. We know why we're doing it, right? And that brought a level of solace, I think, to me and my work that I didn't have in other organizations.
And also, I mean, I would imagine also this thing that you did with me, which I really appreciate, and was totally clear and totally good. You don't have to do in that other job. Like, it's just so much more streamlined. It's like, I do not have to have the explanatory comma for Hamlet so that he understands it. We can just get to work.
Yep.
And so it's that much less other thing to deal with, and you really just sort of deal with the work.
Correct.
Nice. Okay, great. Okay, well, now what are you doing in the studio at that time? I mean, because this was a huge chunk of time, this 7 or 8 years working on this MMI.
Yeah. So I am more involved in my collage making. I'm trying to also track the year, like, where am I? Where's my studio? Okay, so I started my role at MMI in 2016. So I was already there before having Hendrix, right? And so, the fiber and threaded work was happening around that time too. The collage making was happening around that time. And so was the latch hooking work. So it was just a building upon and a continuation of that work. And so 2018, I think it was either 2018 or 2019 where I publicly displayed my latch hooking work for the first time. So yeah, we're still working in those mediums.
Now I wonder part of me is asking this because the other day I was interviewing Paula Kovaric and was sort of thinking about and sort of talking about the perceived either real or not real difference between, art, air quotes, craft, air quotes,
that's a good one.
Painting, air quotes, and then, textiles. When you were making these moves, when you were making these things, did you feel like you had a community of people to talk with? Did you feel like you were kind of on your own? How was your connection with the community in terms of your studio practice at the time?
Yeah, no, at the time I didn't feel like I was actually conversing about the work with others. I wouldn't say that I had a community per se. And to be honest, I don't know if that was important to me at the time, right? I think that I was more so like had an emphasis on making the work and figuring it out, while also responding to my own body while making it. That kind of led the way for me for a while. And so I was very much in this introspective space to where, looking back on it, it might have been, putting the cart before the horse if I had opened it up to dialogue, because I was still figuring it out,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, for sure, there's a time to sort of hole up in the studio and to not listen to anybody and to sort of be by yourself. Now, when you say listen to my body, I mean, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so, one of the reasons why I picked up latch hooking, right, was because of my experience while being with child. And I had a really great therapist, and I was just really trying to tap back into my body. I had shared my body for so long, right? And so as a result, I was feeling the effects of that physically, mentally, emotionally. And so part of my journey during this time was really about understanding, my practice, but also me in this new body, in this new phase of my life, in this new phase of my work. And, I think like many artists, it's hard to think and make. And so I was interested in making and understanding, like, how my body was responding to that. and then I would make meaning maybe after that. But that was the focus.
Right, that makes sense. Okay. Now, all this time, your studio is in the house.
No.
Oh.
So, of course not, man. Like, why would I ever be straightforward? So, I had a studio at the Art Factory for a while. Like right out of college, actually. So, I had a studio at the Art Factory. And then from there, I brought my studio home. And this was maybe 2019 or so. 2018, 2019. And then I was there for maybe like a year and a half at home. And then I'm back out again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, where did you end up going after you were at home for a little bit?
I'm still there now. I'm at Stock and Bell.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, at what point do you have the Crosstown residency? When is that? Is that
right?
Pandemic or just post-pandemic?
Just post.
Okay.
What's that? Maybe 2022?
Okay. Now, at that time, you were sort of on your own. Were you doing any work? I mean,
like
pay the bills, dental insurance kind of work?
Yeah. So I transitioned from MMI in 2022. That was the same year. So
okay.
like the way I remember it is that literally I had applied for the residency at Crosstown. I had applied for the current art fund. I got them both. And I was invited to do the multiplicity show at the Frist. And so all of that happened around the same time. So that's like 2021. And I feel like by 2022, I had left MMI full time and was consulting again with them. So I wasn't there full time, but I was, wrapping up some loose ends, if you will. And yeah, so while I was doing that, I had the residency at Crosstown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now tell me about the grant application. What were your goals for the accelerator grant?
So not the accelerator grant, but
sorry.
this is the current art fund tri-state art grant.
Gotcha.
Yep. So I had applied for there were three things that I was really focused on. The first was I wanted to learn how to spin yarn, and I needed to hire a teacher for that and make time for that. So learning how to spin yarn, traveling to do so. The other part of that was buying the equipment to spin yarn in my studio. I also wanted to make a new body of work as a result. And so those were the things that I was asking for. So tools, if you will, to enhance my studio practice.
Mm-hmm. Now, why did you want to spin your own yarn? What a weird thing to do.
I love telling this story, actually, in that, so both of my grandmothers, my maternal and paternal grandmother, they both pick cotton. My maternal grandmother, that was, according to our family, storytelling, is that was the only quote unquote job she ever had. And so I found that when I learned that information, I found it very ironic or ironic isn't because it's not irony. I found it very aligning, very spiritual even, that I worked in this material, not knowing that was my grandmother's history. And so when I found that out and, kind of set with this understanding of like this fiber that I had always had a desire to work in, I began to think about like the journey of this material. And I wanted to understand the lineage of not only my grandmother's experience with this material in her hand and also my own. And so I started interviewing my aunts around, like, tell me about grandma, tell me about, and whatever they told me, right? And I, was archiving it. And so in addition to that, I'm like, wow, what does that mean for both of my grandparents to have done that? Me a Memphian, right, along the Mississippi River, where cotton was, one of the main cotton distribution centers in the world. And so I'm like reckoning with all this information, if you will. And I thought to myself, like, there is a lineage here between material that I want to know. And I started to think through, like, okay, well, how is fiber made? Okay, well, then how, you're right. And I just kept asking questions of how and why. And I got to a point where the information stopped, right? Because there is no record, or there isn't an easily accessible trail, if you will, to understand the lineage of this material and how we get from, picking cotton to spinning yarn to fabric from a Black lens in a Black context, right? There are some things, let me be clear. But I was really interested in this understanding of picking cotton, spinning it, like what are the stories, what are the gaps? And so I've been on a learning journey since then. But part of that journey for me was, I want to know what that's like in my own hands. And so that's why I wanted to spin yarn. I think, as I am on this journey and uncovering stories and data and readings, it's becoming even more, I think, important for me to be here, right? And to be thinking about my work in this way.
That sounds good. Now, I am, so thinking about that, I know that so much of your practice is sort of about this kind of physicality, the cutting, the tearing, the placing, all of these things, the latch hooking, the physicality, the repetition of it. I'm curious, what are some things that you noticed or you feel like you've gleaned from that kinesthetic experience of taking the cotton from the bowl to the next step, to the next step, to the next step?
Yeah. I feel like I'm learning and witnessing so much.
P.S. I know that is like, I just asked you to tell me a novel, but like, I mean, and I also know that you're sort of not at the beginning, but you're sort of at a place where this experience is sort of new, and in terms of you're wrapping the language around it. But I know that process has been really sort of transformative in terms of the way you think about yourself and in terms of the way that you're thinking about your practice. And so maybe just the 2025 version of this, maybe we'll do another interview in 20 years and then you'll tell me even more.
Yeah. What I'm learning and what I feel like I've been able to witness thus far is that there is so much that if we take a step back and really, as artists, right, if we take a step back and really look at our journeys as a whole, there are pieces and breadcrumbs that were always there that we don't necessarily recognize, maybe until we need to. I don't know. I think what I also have been learning is that when I make my fiber work or any of my work, I'm recognizing that there's a cultural preservation that I'm also interested in around what does it mean to not only honor story, but also retell them in a way that feels archival, but also like preserving what's there. I also realized too that I've always been interested in the idea of labor and like how we labor with material or concepts, or right. And so understanding like how that shows up in my work over time has been very interesting to witness. And then too, if I really like take a step back and look at the process by which I make my work, to me, it actually reminds me of community. In that when I latch hook, if the fiber is not properly connected, it unravels. If I'm not paying attention to what's next to it, the composition doesn't come forth, or it's not compositionally sound. If I am not aware or intentional about the material choice that I use, it won't last. And to me, those are all like metaphors of how I want to show up in community, right? It's like, yeah, I actually do want to pay attention to the person that's next to me or who I'm in close proximity to. I actually do want to understand and uncover what makes people, you know, who they are and what they do, right? And so I need to be present and spend time with them and be intentional about it. So in a lot of ways, sometimes when I look at my latch hook work, it reminds me of the idea of community. So, but there's so much, you know.
Oh, that was so good. Now, and so you're working on this project, and at the same time, you had the residency at Crosstown.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how long was the residency there or here at Crosstown?
Mm-hmm. I had a 3-month residency.
Okay. Now, what did it look like for you? Because I remember coming to the open studios, and I remember there was a demonstration and some storytelling that was really beautiful. And I also remember some of the things that were in the room. Talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you were figuring out, in addition to this great wealth of information that you were sort of going through in terms of thinking about this material.
Yeah. So one of the really, I think, big gifts from the residency was the shared art making space, because I was able to really kind of think about my collage work more on, you know, large scale. And so I was able to get in there and play around with the printing techniques and things like that. And then too, it was also just a really beautiful space. Like, you know, environment is important, and it was nice to have such a, you know, an area where I can actually spread out and, you know, really kind of get into the work. You know, I think too, being in the space and in the residency really kind of opened my mind to possibilities as well, of like, and maybe reassuring me or affirming my practice in a way of like, you know, this is doable for me, this is possible for me. So yeah, I feel like being able to be in the residency and being left alone, so to speak, to make work was pivotal, I think, at that time. Yeah. And I, you know, was also, that's when I got my spinning wheel. And so I had an opportunity to spin in the space and to learn more about that. So I think overall it was a good experience.
And I mean, there's something sort of, I don't know if it's because it's a wheel, but there's something about it that's kind of magical. Like I know, like when I watch people throw pots, there's something sort of magical about it. And then when I see you, you know, spinning and, you know, sort of twisting the fiber and trying to figure out how it goes in, and then it goes in, and then there's this sort of like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you know, like there's a kind of magic to it, or there's a kind of like almost like an alchemy that's present. And so I'm also curious, how does one get a wheel? How does one have a teacher for a wheel? I mean, all of these are like little things that feel like, duh, Hamlet, you did it on the machine.
No.
But like, what was this project like for you? Because I mean, it's like, it's almost like this sort of old-timey thing, and I would imagine that there's not a lot of that there, which is why you're doing it.
Right. So it was not easy at all for me. So, you know, as mentioned before, one of the reasons was to bridge the gap between like this historical legacy that I am uncovering, and then also too, much like the process of latch hooking, you know, being at my spinning wheel, it takes my full body for that, right? And there's something very meditative, even for me, to be at my wheel and to spin. And so it tapped into that very same like healing neuroscience thing that I was already tapped into with latch hooking, right? And this like repetitive, intentional kind of way of working, and like this same gesture over and over again, this same like ritual of an intentional act, right? Spinning does that same thing for me. And, you know, as I was learning how to spin, which I'll tell you how I got to in a moment, but as I was learning how to spin, what I was also, kind of silently exploring was like, I wonder if this act of spinning and how physical and meditative it is, how that actually built resilience for my ancestors. Like there's something about that for me that I'm like, given what I know in the time that they were in, I wonder if this practice was, a moment for them for maybe an escapism or like a meditative escapism. I don't know. Right. But these are the questions that are coming up for me when I spin. How I got to spinning. So yes, one of the reasons why I wanted to spin yarn, because how many Black women do you know spin yarn? Okay. So there's that. And bridging, of course, the gap. But also, too, I wanted to learn how to spin from a Black spinner. And at the time, I couldn't really find anyone. I was like, well, it was very hard to do.
I mean, I can only imagine this process of you like being like, hey, so you're a spinner. That sounds really good. And then you're talking to him on the phone and you're like, P.S., are you Black? Are you? And then you have to figure this out. And so how did you find, I mean, because to me it sounds so perfect, and it sounds so intentional, like all of your other things. But then there's this part of me that's like, it just gets hung up on the totally dumb, boring side stuff. But to me, that also sounds really important, because when you're spending that time with someone, I mean, that really is, it's like an apprenticeship.
For sure. It definitely was that.
Yeah.
So I never found a Black spinner, by the way. So there's that. And that doesn't mean that they're not out there. I just, given my timestamp, I didn't find one. But I did find a very loving, gracious human being by the name of Leslie Darling, who taught me how to spin, who is very much rooted and has a deep understanding of the history and legacy, and understands to her own lineage around spinning. So, and I found her on, I think I either Googled or found her on Instagram or something. And I messaged her and I was like, hey, this is random. Want to learn how to spin yarn. I was just awarded a grant to do so. Can I come to where you live? Like, how's that? She messaged me back and was like, yeah, sure. Would love to teach you. I teach people, but also I'm teaching a class at Aramount, which I don't think is very far from you. So would you be interested in that? And I was like, let me look into it. And so sure enough, I was. I signed up for the class in Aramount, which is, right outside of Knoxville. Okay. And that's where I met her. So we had talked a couple of times via email, and I met her in person the day of so it was a week-long journey with her, along with it was a small class. It was maybe like 5 of us or so. And I walked into the class and I was like, this is what I want to do. I don't want to make yarn to like knit or crochet. I'm not interested. I'm interested in taking this yarn that I made from the scraps of my latch hooking work, because I'm also thinking about like how I'm contributing to the planet. So I have a bunch of scraps. I save them all. Can I like take these and make yarn? And she's like, there's a whole process. There's a whole process. So during that week, I experimented. And so while everyone was in class, like learning the thinness and thickness of like yarn that they could knit and crochet, I was at the carter and other places, the drum carter, trying to figure out how to make what's called novelty yarn. I bought my spinning wheel while at Aramount. There is a really great spinnery like store in the Appalachia, and the wheel is actually made for this like chunky yarn that I was interested in making. And so we went as a class to this store, and it was like love at first sight, me and my wheel. And and I got on it. The owner let me get on it, and I tried it, and I bought it that day. I think it was either that day or the next day. And I was like, how am I going to get this home? Because I actually flew to Knoxville and then I drove to Aramount. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get this home. And I had met so many incredible people at Airmount that I still follow and keep up with today. And I had met someone who was teaching, I think he was teaching a printmaking class. And we were having lunch. And I'm like, because, we connect and we talk like, oh, how's your class going? Da, da, da. And it was my turn to talk. And I was like, I'm loving it. Like, this is everything that I need. Like, I have so many ideas. I was like, I bought a wheel today, but I don't know how I'm going to get it home. And he was like, well, where do you live? I was like, I live in Memphis, Tennessee. He's like, well, I'm driving through Tennessee to head back home. I think he was headed to maybe Arizona. And I was like, okay. He's like, I can drop it off for you. And I was like, what? So we packed up my wheel before I left. And he was there a couple of days after me. And he was like, I promise I'll take care of it. And he drove it to Crosstown and brought it to my residency studio here. Yeah. And that's how I got my wheel.
I love all of that. I mean, for me, the really great thing about that is that, the cool thing about Airmount, I think, is that if I remember right, it's kind of like Penland in that people kind of come from all over and they're there to learn a specific thing in this really tightly packed period of time. And there's a lot of, if I remember right, a lot of cross-pollination, like in terms of like the meetings and the presentations and all the other stuff. I would imagine that experience was really powerful in terms of, because I know you are a person that really sort of revels in the story and revels in hearing other people's stories. And I know that when you're doing that process, there is a lot of that sharing. Yeah,
it was incredible. I met so many cool people. One person that I met while there has now written a book around Black craft, which I'm super excited about. And when I met him, because he was teaching chair making and they did a presentation, because all of the instructors, when you're there as part of, I guess, the gig, you do artist talk, so to speak. And he was giving his presentation. He had a colleague that he was working with, and I kept looking. I'm like, this guy looks so familiar. He looks so familiar. Why does he look so familiar? And I'm listening to him. I'm like, I feel like I know this work. And after he got off stage, I asked him, like, did you recently get a grant for like Center for Craft? And he was like, yeah. I was like, I know your work. I know this work. Like, I've been following it. Well, rather, I just learned about this work because I also applied for Center for Craft grant, and I was in the top 20, but I didn't get the grant. And I was like, I definitely want to reapply. Part of my being here is for me to, learn more and to be able to, talk about fully what it is that I want to do with this research grant. And he was like, oh yeah, well, I'll be more than happy to share mine. Let me know when you get ready to do it. We can talk about it. And it was a beautiful experience. Like, everyone was so gracious, so kind. It was amazing. It was great. I highly recommend it. Also, I did not know about this circuit of like Penland, and I didn't know about this circuit until that moment.
It's a weird craft thing. I mean, it really is. It's like somehow either it's just not on our radar, or there's not a lot of like, well, this is also art, dummy. Like this is in there, and then that fits in there. But yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there are several. I mean, there's a bunch that are great and rich that we need to take advantage of.
We really do.
Okay, so you come back to Crosstown after this residency.
Yes.
And then was it sort of like in the middle of the residency?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you just like went to a workshop inside in the middle of a residency and then came back. And so I'm curious about how you were processing that information and processing those stories, because I know you're not only learning the craft, the physicality of how to make these things, but you're also trying to figure out how to implement them. How were you able to build that bridge between the making of the material and then moving that material into a thing that you wanted to make?
I was very overwhelmed, actually. I was very overwhelmed because I had taken so much in, right? So, to your point, I had learned this new skill. and trying to understand, you know, the materiality of it, right? Of like, okay, what's this, what's that? I have a new tool and I'm trying to figure that out. But then two, I'm trying to integrate it into my latch hook work, and that's not working, by the way. So what I thought was going to be a very natural, easy transition from, you know, making the yarn and then implementing in my latch hook, it actually didn't work at all. The yarn that I was making was so novel, right, that it was too thick to go through my hook. And so it wasn't adhering the way in which I thought it would. And so, yeah, it didn't work right away. But artists, right? That's that. I mean, when does anything ever work right away? And so, you know, as a result, that required more time for me to figure some things out. And to be quite candid, I still have not figured out how to use my spinning, my hand spun yarn into my latch hook work only until recently. And I, you know, have the idea for it, but I haven't actually done it yet. So I'm in my studio now working on some new work where it will be incorporated into that work. But that was 2022, it's 2025. Right?
Now, talk to me about the Multiplicity show. I mean, that is a huge opportunity. It's a huge showcase. It was a show that traveled, and then also your work is hanging alongside some of the bigs in the world. And so I'm super interested in hearing your perspective on that experience.
Yeah, you know, that experience, every time I think about it, I'm like, what? You know, to be able to show my work publicly is a gift in and of itself, right? And then to be able to show it alongside folks that I studied in college was like knock me off my feet kind of thing. And I remember when the curator for the show, Katie, came, like, I think she reached out to me via social media first. And I was like, this is not real, like spam. And then she emailed me and I was like, oh, okay. And she asked for a studio visit and she came by and I was like, this is totally real. You're so real. That's crazy. And so, you know, she looked at my work and we talked about it. And she was like, yeah, I've been working on this show. It's, you know, it's taken me 10 years to pull it together. And she, you know, started to explain the you know, the curatorial kind of direction statement and all of that. I'm like, oh, wow, that sounds amazing. And she then started to name the artists that were in the show. And I'm like, I'm kind of looking at her. I'm like, oh, wow, that's great. Not thinking she's going to be like, and I would love for you to show your work. So I'm just like intrigued by the conversation. And she's like, yeah, I would love to show your work along. And I was like, what? Where's the paperwork? Like, I'll sign it right now. What are we even talking about? And so, you know, that even just from that moment to then seeing the work in the show to be invited to speak on panels in both Nashville and Houston, and to see the work travel and to meet some incredible artists and writers, right? The curators and art historians who were involved in the show, the curators who wrote pieces for the catalog. I mean, just being in the, you know, in the midst of all of that greatness, I was just like, this is incredible. So grateful for the opportunity. And then it also, like, you know, afforded me other opportunities as well. Like, I got a residency in Nashville from that show, and being able to connect to folks there. Yeah.
Now, what was the residency in Nashville?
Yeah, so it was with Harpeth Hall, which is a all-girl private school in Nashville. And they do an artist residency every year, and they switch the disciplines. So this particular year it was for visual art, and the young people a few of the young people from the school had gone to see the show, and they had a group on campus that was focused on Black girls specifically, and they invited me to come out for that residency so that I could meet them and talk with them, and then also just kind of share my story and my practice. And so I was there for a week, and I think I engaged with like 200 students during that time, and we made over like, I forget the count of collages, but it was like thousands of collages that we made, that I then like cut down and made like this really beautiful wall hanging in their space. So
wow, okay. And so one of the things you mentioned several times is working with young people and working with people inside the community. I mean, I think it's also one of those kind of duh things where, like, you know, I'm sure when I ask this question, people are like, well, duh. But what is it? What do you think? How does that kind of interaction, how does that fit for you in terms of thinking about how it works in your life?
Yeah, so I can't remember a time when I wasn't in close proximity to younger people. I have always gravitated to young people. Young people have always gravitated to me. And I feel like I have a very nurturing spirit as well. And so I have, I think, just a different stance when it comes to young people. Like, they're my jam. Like, I'm actually much rather be with young people than adults, to be honest. To be honest, because I think that, you know, the space that they hold is just what I'm about. Like, they're truth tellers, they're honest, they're like, either they rock with you or they don't. It's very like, you know, it doesn't always, I don't know, they just don't beat around the bush. You kind of know in a lot of ways, to a certain extent, when it comes to young people. And two, like, I always have felt that I was misunderstood when I was younger by adults. And so part of my ethos and my values are like, you know, I want young people to feel seen by me, right? And so, you know, it's important to me. My mother also owned a daycare. I've always worked, you know, in some kind of child care capacity. So yeah, I've always had a desire to be amongst them. And then two, I've always had a desire to hold space with them and advocate for them when needed. So,
yeah, I mean, that seems totally in line with everything that you've said. Now I'm curious about that multiplicity show. You have this experience, and so what is that like, going from that experience back into the studio and sort of reframing or sort of rethinking about how you see yourself in the larger community of the art world?
Mm-hmm. That show did a lot for me. I in being in the show and, you know, navigating that experience with others, I realized that, like, my little Memphis bubble of what I knew as an artist in Memphis. And I mean, to be fair, like, I know about the art world. I know what's happening in the art world. I'm a student of that. I'm a learner of that. But there's something that happens when you are like, when your feet are planted in the in the art world outside of Memphis. And I remember being at the Frisk and like a fire being lit under me. I was like, okay, this is like go time for me. Like, I need to get clear about what I'm making, you know, everything. Like, I need an artist mentor. Like, it was one of those moments where it was like, okay, if this is where I want to be, if this is where I want to go, let's get to work. Right. It was just so eye-opening for me around, like, I got some work to do and let's do it. So I came home and was like, let's go. And, you know, started to make more work, started to get clear about my interest in material and being able to explicitly name that. And just, I've been working on this new body of work since that moment, and the work has grown my understanding of it has grown. And it's kind of like one of those things where when you're in proximity with those who you admire, it sharpens you in a way to where you want to level up. And so that's what that was for me.
Yeah. And one of the things I'm thinking about as you have been talking, you've done such a great job of talking about your direct connections in terms of how you felt fed, how you felt nurtured, how you are also a nurturer and a feeder. One of the questions that I was thinking about was how have you seen yourself in terms of fitting in with the Memphis art community itself? I mean, I know that this idea of community has been really strong and has sort of been this thread that's run through our talks. But I'm curious, what are some things that you see happening in the city that you feel like have been influential or important for you as a maker? And it could be exhibition spaces, it could be groups, it could be, like you said, those opportunities that were happening inside there. I'm curious about how you think of yourself as interacting with the arts community in town.
I feel like my interaction with the arts community here has influenced more of my professional, my professional career and lane. When I think about the act of creating and, having a studio practice, I feel like that there are people who support that, but to have a level of critical discourse or to have, I think a group of people that were rigorous in their making, I don't necessarily think that I've always had that. But I've always felt that I've had folks who support the notion of making, right? And to me, that looks like, people showing up at the shows and having more space to show your work, and right. And so there is that here. And for me has always been that here. I think what I have been maybe missing, and I want to be clear in that I'm not saying that Memphis doesn't have this. What I'm saying is that either I wasn't as intentional as I could have been in finding this. And what I'm saying is like what was missing for me that I'm just now getting is like this heavy discourse around my work and the conceptual ideology around my work, right? And what rigor looks like as a studio artist. I feel like I've been missing that. But the support here has always been, show your work, make your work, show your work, make your work. But I think,
Now, what is that kind of conversation around the rigor or this rigor in terms of how you're thinking about your work? What's the manifestation for that for you in terms of like, what is that term? How does it look?
So we're Southern, right? And people are really nice. People are really nice. And so the manifestation of that to me would be, what would critical, constructive dialogue and feedback really look like? And if the work is trash, are you willing to tell me it's trash? And I think on the other side of that, and again, this might be something too that I'm just grappling with within myself as an artist, but I am the kind of person who is like, I know where I want to go. And I know the kind of work that I want to make, and I know my capacity. And I feel like that there, I feel like that there have been times where I'm making the work and the concept hasn't caught up yet, or the concept is forward and the skill and the work hasn't caught up yet. And so that's what I'm talking about. Like, can we have some critical discourse around that? And then are there people here who can help point me in a direction to get there? Again, I'm not saying that those people don't exist here. I'm just saying, like, as I look back at my practice and what I needed, I feel like that's where I am.
Well, I'm totally with you. I think it. I'll be happy to say that it doesn't exist here in a public forum kind of way. I mean, there really is it's very rare that we have any writing.
Right.
Like the Memphis Flyer doesn't really have a writer.
Right.
Every once in a while, it'll have a visual arts story. The Commercial Appeal, I don't think so. Daily Memphian, every once in a while, will have something in there, but there is no critical discourse. Like if you get an article in Burnaway or if you get an article in Number, it's again very rare. And so that kind of like art criticism per se is non-existent for sure. But I'm wondering, like, I mean, again, to go back to Paula Kovarik, you know, I was talking with her about her 6 Points group and how, you know, she had to sort of like she and a group of 5 other people get together on a regular basis, and they have these sort of rotating dinners followed by an individual critique. And so like that thing that you're talking about for sure exists, but you got to do it, you know what I mean? But not only do you have to do it, but you also really have to have kind of voices that you trust.
Right.
And then people that, you know, obviously you trust, but then also people who will be honest and who'll come and sort of be able to talk to you. And those voices are really also really rare and sort of difficult to find. And so I'm totally with you. Now, but I wonder, what do you think, where do you think it's coming from now?
Yeah. So I feel like at this point in my journey, I have, you know, a group of people who can provide that with me now. Didn't have it like 2 years ago, but I do now. And then also too, I think to your point, I used to be of a mindset of like, you know, if you want to come to my studio, just hit me up and you can come. And now I am the like antithesis of that. Like, I don't want many people in my studio anymore. I don't.
Which is totally fair. I mean,
I don't want it.
Truth be told, I mean, it's been 25 years since I finished with grad school, and I'm still okay. I don't really need people to come to my studio. I mean, every once in a while it'll be a thing that happens, but it's really a rare thing. And so I don't feel like a weirdo or a social leper for not thinking that you need to have people at your studio.
Yeah, and so I'm just trying to like, you know, reteach people like you can't come anymore. Like, sorry, that was a thing, but now it's not a thing. And I think that's because too, like, I feel like that there have been some moments where I've been too impulsive in showing and talking about the work. And I think now I'm more so interested in clarity for me and for the work. And having that small group of folks, you know, that could come in and look at it and give me some critical feedback. I think I want to sit here for a minute and like see what the work is doing and how it continues to like gel and come forth and all of that. And I think that the more that I can kind of protect that, the better off the work will be.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, and also thinking about your studio practice, I mean, so much of it is putting things together, you know, and figuring out the right recipe or figuring out the right amount of, a particular material or a particular thing. And so much of that is really intuitive, and so much of that really is in this kind of gut space that you're still navigating, that still feels really powerful and kind of important. Okay, so that said, recently you've been showing more, and so I'm curious to hear about how you're processing some of that information, and then thinking about your studio practice now. How are you thinking about it now?
Yeah. So, I just had an exhibition at Sheet Cake Gallery titled Loose Ends, and the work that I was able to create for that show feels like it feels in line with the trajectory of where I want to go. And to be quite frank, I feel like when preparing for that show, I wrestled with the idea of like, when am I supposed to show my work? Does that make sense? I wrestled with that because on one hand, it was like, I'm on a journey, much like the people who witness my work are also on a journey with me. And right, we're journeying goodness together. And so there was a point in making that work around, well, what happens when I'm not ready to publicly talk about it, right? And I need more time in the making of the thing. And I wrestle with it. I actually wrestle with that often because I feel like, you don't want to wait forever, right? And not show anything because you're trying to figure something out. And then I think it's nuanced in that you're not always going to arrive at the end point either. And so my whole idea is that I hope that every time I show work that people who get to witness it understand that I'm on a journey. And right. And so don't take this iteration of the journey as the final destination. Just take it as maybe an exit that we've exited off the expressway or whatever that might look like. But I think what I wrestle with in maybe accepting that too is that, well, everyone has not been on the journey at all at the same time. Maybe somebody is just getting on, right? And so, I'm sure other artists grapple with this same idea. And so for me, being someone who is so interested in material and who is so interested in following their curiosities, right? I wonder what that does, if anything, for the viewer. And then on the flip side of that, I wonder if I care. Kind of don't, kind of do, And so these are the questions that I'm holding while making my work, while alongside me trying to, tell the story that I need to tell with my hands, my heart, and my gut, right? So.
Boy, that's really good too. Now, for me, that feels really good, and I love the way you ask the question, when do you know when to show it? And I love hearing a grown-up ask that question because I hear my students ask that a lot. And I mean, for me as a teacher, that's one of those questions where you're kind of like, I'm not sure, because like there are plenty of precedents for people who did not show until later, or there's lots of precedents for people who started showing the minute they made one thing and then everything sort of went out there. And I love that thing that you were saying about how you were sort of mid-journey, or not mid-journey, but you were kind of mid-journey. Yeah,
for sure.
And so thinking about that and how that works, how do you then take that, and we're here in the month, 2 months, a month and a half after your show ends. How are you processing that in terms of thinking about the studio? How do you go back into the studio after this? P.S. Parenthetical aside, Brittney and I actually talked about this last time when the machine wasn't here, and we were sort of talking about like how sometimes we will have this sort of like postpartum depression after doing a show, and so like all of that sort of thrown in there. How are you processing that this month and a half after your really tremendous show there at Sheet Cake?
Yeah. It definitely feels like, postpartum. I think for various reasons, of course, the one that I just named around, what does it mean when you're still figuring it out? And then I think too, just thinking through also where I'm taking the work and being a little bit, nervous isn't the right word, but being a little bit hyper aware around how different it's going to look. And, I feel like in art school, there's an emphasis on, continuity, right? And being able to tell a journey of your studies, right? And I hold that still. And I do think that my work is very linear. And there are several moments in the work that, are compounded and have culminated on the last moment or from the last moment. And again, I'm also wondering too, like, why does that matter? Like, who made that? Is that a rule? Like, who made that rule? And then I think about the people that I admire and like their journey, and where they are. There's a clear, like, trajectory, and so I'm like, what does this all mean, right? Does it? And then two, I'm going back to this notion of like, but what's the story that I need to tell? And what does that call for? And so I do feel in some ways overstimulated by, after having the show. And then at the same time, I am going to take this whole year and not show anything new. And I'm going to take this moment of building out and making the work that feels true for me right now, right? And so, and my hope is that maybe the world will hold it, in a way that is lovely and gracious. And then also understanding that they may not.
I mean, for me, one of the things that I love about what you're saying is that you are aware that there is this need for some laboratory time or some gestation period to let things kind of be mushy and sort of unresolved for a little while, and then also kind of intentionally doing that, like in the same way that maybe like somebody after a relationship would say, oh, I'm going to take some time off from dating or just showing. And so, I mean, to me, that feels really healthy and really smart and really interesting. And of course, to me, one of the things that's also sort of wild about you is that you've got this path and then you have all these other great forks that are kind of going off from it. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on outside of the studio now?
Yeah, so I'm back in the nonprofit space. And so I'm working for Contemporary Arts Memphis here, which is a organization that's focused on helping young creatives, high schoolers, think about what it means for them to be an artist, right? And so we are focused on getting them into college, getting dollars for them so that they can go off to college and major in art and have an art career. And so I think this opportunity is very timely in that I've done that journey, right? And so I know what it's like on the inside. And then additionally, I've also worked at another nonprofit that was very similar, but the emphasis was music, right? And so I feel like I'm in a really good spot to not only help to guide and steward young people, but then also to share my story. What keeps me up at night, though, when it comes to that work is that sometimes I feel like an anomaly, like these opportunities, everyone doesn't have access, right? And depending on what you make and where you are in the world, right? And so when I think about bringing in young people and telling them, like, if you love art, you can do this. Like, sometimes I'm like, can they? Is that real? It is real, right? And so, of course, capitalism seeps in, and then I'm like, what's happening? Is this a lie? What am I doing? The world. But yeah.
I can just imagine, like, people being like, yeah, that interview was going so good. And then there was this, like, 20-minute pause where Hamlet and Brittney just lost their minds for a second. And then you can hear, like, them opening a whiskey bottle. I don't totally understand that. But, okay, so I'm totally with you. I mean, to me, the thing that I love that you said that about how you're an anomaly, I mean, for me, you are for sure an anomaly. You are a 1 in a million. But I think, for me, the thing that's so powerful, and we talked about this maybe the first time you came in, was when you come in and you give your presentation in my professional practices class. Mm-hmm. It is like, it is legit one of my favorite things. Like, I'm getting teared up just thinking about it.
Oh.
Like, you just have this thing where I turn and I see all of the other people kind of going, huh, all right, I might be able to do this, mm-hmm. because, like, again, you have that great story, where you begin at the beginning, and you talk about, like, going in and saying you want this job, and how do you get this job, and all that. Mm-hmm. And because I remember when you do that presentation again, I remember people, their first question is, how can I tap into that? What can I do? Let's figure out how to do that. And it's totally sincere. And that's not a thing that the students say when anybody else comes in. There's never this, like, well, I want to be involved in that. How do I do that? And then they follow up with you. And I mean, I think to me that's really powerful. But then also knowing how we are human beings, like, I know that sometimes we have these moments of doubt. And, like, as you were saying, you're talking to these students and how you've done this journey. There's a part of me that was like, hold up, Brittney, you're doing it right now, and so, like, there has to be this really massive sort of ego thing in a good way to be able to come in and be the person that we want to be in front of those youngsters, mm-hmm. And to be able to say, okay, I'm having a hard time in the studio right now, but I totally feel good about where we are, and I totally feel good about you, It's mm-hmm. really hard. I mean, it's like mm-hmm. It's not like a stages of grief kind of thing where you're like, well, I did this one and then I did this other one. We're constantly cycling through this doubt, self-doubt, confidence, wondering, curiosity, all of that feels really good and sort of powerful to me in thinking about your practice and your work. Now, one of the questions that I was thinking about when you were saying that was, or one of the questions that I will have sometimes for the other guests who come in and are sort of talking about the nonprofit space or thinking about organizations that are really making a difference. Mm-hmm. They'll say, and I'll say, so what do we need? What's the thing that's going to help us? Not that there is a thing to fix us, but one of the things that always comes to my mind is CAM.
Really?
Like when people say, like, what do we need?
Cool.
And I'm like, oh, we need CAM. And oh my God, it's right there. Can we get 7 of them? Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I think it's one of those things that is a transformative. There is a before CAM and an after CAM in terms of thinking about the city's artistic landscape. I think it is such a powerful possibility, and I just love that I'm here so that I can kind of see it and get a sense of what's going on. And it, it's one of those things, whenever I run into somebody from CAM, I do the exact same thing that the students do with you, and I say, if you ever need me, you let me know. Mm-hmm. I'm totally happy to help in any way that I can, because I want to be a part of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's one of those things. And so I'm curious, as you're working on that, Hamlet asking for a job aside, what is it that you're like, when you're thinking about CAM, how are you thinking about it?
That's a good one. When I'm thinking about CAM, it's such a special it's such a special opportunity in that when I think about me being embedded in the organization that I'm in, the capacity that I'm in, I often am thinking like, baby Brit, like what, what did I need? What did I want? Now, granted, obviously that was many, many moons ago. And I do understand that what young people need now has transformed and expanded. But I think though at the core of that, it feels very much the same, right? And so what I needed was an internal and an external affirming of the possibility of this, of being an artist. What I needed was access, not only access to space, material, also access to knowledge, right? And in CAM, we have this really beautiful library, right? And I just like harken back to a time of like, what would my life have been like had I had this beautiful library alone, like not even walking in the studio yet. So when I think about this opportunity for young people, I want so badly for those who don't quite get it yet, the students who don't get it yet, I want so badly to be like, you have to get this. Like, you have to, you don't understand. Your life would be so much easier, like, or not even easier, but it would be so much fruit, like, so do it. And we just had interviews a couple of weeks ago. And so getting a chance to hear the young people, talk about where they want to go and where they want to be and, college. And we hear often too, just like stories of like, well, I want to like major in political science and then minor in art, right? But they clearly have the talent and the capacity to be an artist, but they might don't have the internal and external affirming, right? Or we might hear a story around, I think I want to do this, but I don't have materials at home, and so it just doesn't, right? And so we get an opportunity to say, no, actually it's possible. And here are 4 people who are interviewing you who've all done it, right? As a reminder for you that it is possible. So, and then of course being at, with Derek Fajor and under his tutelage, like, it's just like everything that I would want in a job. It's everything that I would want in a job, in a career, and for that matter. And so being able to, because I've been in arts organizations since graduating. This is not like new to me, but this feels different in that it's in my field. It's under somebody I admire. It's with people who get it, right, through and through. And so it's just a matter of like, how do we get the young people to also fully understand how special it is? And in a lot of ways they do. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And in some ways they don't. And might not get it until later because their amygdala or whatever hasn't formed, or whatever it is, prefrontal cortex. I don't know.
That crazy thing.
Whatever it is.
Now, to go back, I mean, to me, all of that sounds really great. Again, now I'm curious, thinking about that, if you could somehow make 50 other Brittneys, what else is there to be done in town? I mean, for sure, CAM, I think, is a massive step in terms of making the city better. P.S., of course, we recognize that we're talking about art. And how that is a huge part of a very specialized set of understandings and experiences. But thinking about the importance of art, and how it can be transformative, even if people aren't necessarily going to become artists. What do you think in terms of making the city's art community stronger, more vibrant, more interesting, more conducive to the things that you're interested in? What are some of the steps that you think might be helpful to get us to there?
Yeah. And we've made some great steps in that direction with the new position within, at City Hall. I even looking at cities that are similar in size, right? Think about St. Louis or others. I'm like, yeah, our tax dollars should maybe go into a arm of the local government specifically for art, right? And not just the tourism tax, right? When I go to a place like St. Louis and I go into Contemporary Arts Memphis Museum, right, and I don't have to pay, that says something to me about what they believe as it relates to art. So, that's an opportunity. I feel like as well, building, I think, an understanding of how art is fully integrated in every aspect of our life is another one. And so how do we get these major corporations, these Fortune 500 companies that exist here? Is there an opportunity for them to understand how hiring an artist in their, corporation what that might look like? How could that change, the dynamic or the trajectory or whatever of that business? So my hope is that, and again, we're making steps, but my hope is that folks understand that art is not a luxury. Like, it's not the dessert. It's actually the thing that keeps and makes us whole, right? And so how do we honor that in a way that allows for artists to do that? In a perfect world, although I love Cam, in a perfect world, I should just be able to be an artist. Right?
Do you think your temperament would allow you to do that?
Probably not. Let me think about that. I'll hold that question. I'm going to hold that question. I don't know. I feel like, when I was just a full-time artist, I don't know if I could fully answer that question because, the steps that I would need to take and or the opportunities that I needed to, kind of get was contingent upon my livelihood. Right. Mm-hmm. Whereas, if being an artist had a salary attached to it, I don't know. Maybe I would have the temperament. Mm-hmm. But the fact that I had to be so entrepreneurial all the time, I don't know. And, it's doable, obviously. My husband's a full-time artist and has been almost 10 years. So I know it's doable. I just wish that it didn't have to. I wish I didn't have to factor in so much in addition to making my work. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Am I being clear? Does that?
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, that sounds really good. Now, one of the things I'm also thinking about in terms of being a parent is how is it to be in a relationship with an artist and then also to have a kid? Like, is it one of those things where you guys are like, don't be an artist. This is how you be a lawyer. Be a lawyer. Like, how do you guys, there's a part of me that just wants to do like a reality TV show with just Hendrix, like following him around and seeing what it's like to be in the house. You would watch,
for sure. You would watch. Yeah. He's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in our house, it's like, do and be whatever you want to be. Like, whatever that, he's 6. So it's like, in your 6-year-old body, like, do and like, be curious about lots of things. And like, we'll support that. So Hendrix, up until maybe a month or so ago, he was not into like pencil art making. He enjoyed music. He enjoyed, like Ninja Kids. But he wasn't like, we could put a canvas in front of him or paper in front of him and he would like do whatever and then he'd be done with it. He would tell me repeatedly, like, I want to play the trumpet. I want to play the trumpet. I want to play the trumpet. And I'm like, okay, well, according to Google, you have to be 8. So like, maybe play the piano until we get to that. And he's like, I guess. So he's playing piano now. And he's like, but I want to play the trumpet. And I'm like, no, there's a journey here. Like, learn the notes and stuff on the piano. And then maybe that'll help you when you get to the trumpet. And he's like, okay, I guess. So like, he's in piano. And he's really, I mean, to be 6, he like noodles on the keys and he gets the old McDonald right away. And he's like playing the notes or whatever. So he's pretty decent at it. But like a month ago, he has had like this desire to draw. And so Jamon bought him a sketchbook recently, and the sketchbook is almost like filled with, I actually have some drawings on my phone now because I'm thinking about getting a tattoo of one of his drawings. But like the kind of drawing though that he is really into is more of like a mirroring. So like Jamon would draw and then he would repeat. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not. I'm like, because I don't want him to be dependent upon that. But it is also teaching him how to draw. And so I don't know how to navigate that. We'll do it when we need to. But so he like carries his sketchbook around now, and he's got his color pencils, and you know, wherever we are, he'll pull his sketchbook out and he'll draw something. And so he's into that. So we support that. So, you know, at this point, I'm more focused on, let's follow your curiosities. Let's stick with it though. Like we were in Taekwondo. So we did that for 6 months, and it's like, he's like, well, I'm not really feeling that. Okay, let's try something else. Right. So we're following him. We're following him, and we're learning him just as much as he's learning himself. And we're open to where his curiosities might lead him as it relates to creativity. His grandparents are also musicians. And so there's all kind of stuff in our family that's running through. So we're just like open to whatever he wants to land.
Now, last question. So one thing I'm thinking about too a lot with these interviews, especially thinking about how important for you the things that are around you are. I'm curious about what your home space is like in terms of art and in terms of things that are around you that sort of feed you.
Mm-hmm. Right. I would say right now, I have a pretty mid-sized library in my home. Like I have a lot of books is what I'm trying to say. I have a lot of books. And right now, my library is what feeds me. But as far as like visually what's in my home, it's always funny because we get this question a lot and people are always like, man, I bet your home is like amazing. You know, I bet stuff everywhere, like art. And we're like, not quite. We have a mural in our home and we have like a gallery wall in our home. But there's so much wall space that we need to like fill in, but we're so dedicated to filling all of, you know, the walls outside of our home that we haven't really, you know, I think done it up in the way in which we could and we want to. So if I had to think about like my environment and what feeds me, I would say it's the books on my shelf and like what I gravitate to when it comes to like literature.
So literature as opposed to like art books.
Well, both.
Okay.
Both are true.
I lied and said that was my last question. One more.
Okay.
Is there an art book that's a comfort book for you that you go back to again and again?
It's actually not an art book. It's called Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. I have several. So that's one. There's also the book by... I see the cover in my head. You got to know this book. I feel like I should buy it for you because you were always handing me good reads. His name is Gay Ross, I think.
Oh, Ross Gay.
Ross Gay, backwards.
That's cool.
There are two books though. The one that I enjoy is
it the Book of Delights?
The Joy,
Inciting
Inciting
Joy. Yeah. So the second
The second
of
one.
the...
I have them both, but I like Inciting Joy. That's up there. And then there are a series of art books that I have by the Whitechapel Publishing. Love those. I go back to those often. Yeah.
Do you have Beholding by Ross Gay?
No.
Okay.
Is that the earlier?
Don't even think about it. I got you covered. It's a book. It's poetry, but it's a book length reflection on this one play that Dr. J did. And it's like one of those books where, kind of like Christina Sharp's In the Wake, where she goes back to the same thing over and over again. In fact, he cites that book as a really important book for him with Beholding. And so he kind of goes back to the same idea, but then he'll kind of slide over. And so it's not just about Dr. J, but it's like he kind of uses that as a touchstone, sort of back and forth. Oh, it's so good. I have an extra copy. I'll give it to you.
Also, real quick, because I know we're ending this. Christina Sharp, I just got...
The new one.
No. I'm horrible with names.
Ordinary Thoughts.
Is that the new one?
Ordinary... that one.
Okay.
It's really good.
We got to say it on the air, though, in case people want to... Let's see. I just got it. It was recommended to me maybe a year. Ordinary Notes.
Ordinary Notes.
There we go.
Yeah. That's also a really great one.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's in the bibliography. We'll have a link to it in the show notes.
Oh, that would be great. It's the book list.
I know, we're very smart. We know how to do this. Brittney, thank you so much. To be honest, I was just asking questions because I just didn't want it to end. I just wanted you to never go. And now I'm very sad that it'll be another 20 years before we sit down and we chat. I really enjoyed it. It was a real treat. Thank you so much.
Happy to do it.
And that was the third of 3 interviews that I did with Brittney Boyd Bullock. That interview was recorded on March 5th, 2025. Please join us next week when we have another interview. Until then, thank you for listening.